Hello, everyone. My name is Ron Watkins, and I'm a shark ambassador with Sharks for Kids. We put up a little poll to start off today's meeting. We wanted to get an idea of how many of you have seen Shark Week. And to no surprise, about 90% of you have seen Shark Week, and over half of you have seen more than 5 shows of Shark Week. And most of you said, I want to see as many shows as I can. So today is a special day for you because if you've seen these shows, then you're going to love our guest, Duncan Brake. He's going to talk about what goes into all of that video. Hey, Duncan, say hi.
Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everybody's having a great day out there today.
So you get to actually see the man behind the video camera. So he's going to come out and show us some of his tricks and tips and give you probably some pretty funny stories about On Location. I noticed some of the participants' names are familiar, and I see a lot of you who have joined over and over again, and just wanted to let you know that we really appreciate that. And there are actually certificates that you can get for watching these shows. So even after just watching today's show, you can qualify for an appreciation certificate for one show. There's other certificates for over 5 shows, and the top certificate of participation is for 10 or more shows. So I think I'm getting pretty close to that top certificate. So I'll show you where to get those at the end of today's presentation. So today we have Duncan Brake, and he's going to be talking about filming Shark Week. You may not recognize him when he came on, but I guarantee you that if you've watched Shark Week, Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, Nat Geo, BBC, any of those shows, you have seen his work, and you've probably seen a lot of it. You just didn't know that that was him videoing it. So that's what we're going to learn about today. Duncan's also a marine biologist, and he assists with the Bimini Sharklab as well, where him and Jillian, his wife, who's the founder and president of Sharks for Kids, live. So Duncan is an Emmy-nominated cinematographer, which is pretty amazing. He's won tons of awards for his cinematography. He's also an amazing photographer as well. And after today's show, definitely check out his website on cameramanunderwater.com, and you're going to see a long list of credits of shows I guarantee you've seen. It's a very, very impressive list, and he's got some really cool videos on there. So if you like what you see today, definitely check him out. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to you, Duncan, and let you amaze us with all of your videos and stories.
All right, thank you very much, Ron, for that wonderful introduction. Good day, everybody. Nice to see you all on here. I was pretty much the crash test dummy for the first webinar here. So I'm repeating it again because we had a couple of technological issues on the first one. So I'm going to be giving a similar talk, but I'm going to be adding a few extra little bits and pieces. So in case you watched the first one, it's going to be a little bit different than that as well. So yeah, nice to meet you all and see you all online. I'm going to start the presentation in a moment. Here we go, share screen, keynote, boom, share, and play. Boom. All right. Okay, to start with, I'm just going to let this little sort of promo reel down on the bottom left kind of run its course. I've been really lucky to be involved in a ton of different video productions and projects throughout the world. I originally started as a marine biologist, and I went to uni for marine biology, studied up in Scotland, and then ended up traveling quite a bit, ended up going down to the Falklands and Antarctica, which was a pretty chilly place, but it was an amazing place because there was so much wildlife around. And I was able to capture all this wildlife, the albatross, the penguins, the seals, and the whales when I wasn't working on the sciencey parts. So that's really where I started filming. And then after I had been in the Falklands and South Georgia, down to the Antarctic ice edge, I then ended up trying to get a little bit warmer, and ended up in the Bahamas in Bimini, where I started as one of the staff members for the Bimini Biological Field Station. And that's the first time I tried putting a video camera inside an underwater housing. And trust me, there were a lot of mistakes on the way. And yeah, some pretty shoddy footage to start with, I imagine, if I look back at it. As you can see on the little promo reel, I've been very lucky to travel all the way around the world, see some amazing sights, like those mating dolphins right there. You can see some Cassiopeia jellyfish zoomed in there. That's actually Doc Gruber, a great Doc Gruber that used to run the Bimini Biological Field Station, putting a tag into a beautiful big sharkie. Some other scenes, some lobster, the big old southern stingray gracefully coming over the top of the camera, and a great hammerhead, as we all know. And some pretty little spotted dolphins blowing bubbles at me. Cheeky smile. There we go. And finishing with that big old graceful tiger shark. I think a lot of this footage is 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even a little bit older. I should probably do a more recent one, but it gives you an idea of the sort of stuff that I put together. Cool. All right. So as Ron said, I've done a lot of work with different shows. Especially sharks portrayed very, very differently in the media. They're almost like this mythical creature that we've sort of been brought up to kind of be a little bit cautious about and a little bit concerned about. And that's the thing. You can Google sharks, and the craziest images turn up. And oh, there we go. That was the one I was after. The craziest images turn up. You can see right there. We've got this weird fascination of sharks as being these powerful, scary beasts. Yeah, and the media is part of the way we portray these animals. Now, the great thing over the last sort of decade, we've been changing the way that we portray these animals, looking more at kind of how we behave with them, and the science behind them, and kind of building adventure shows around them, and then also blue chip natural history sequences. But traditionally, as seen in this slide with one of Rihanna's albums, we've always kind of seen sharks as these sensational sort of killer beings, but not exactly the case. So I'm going to kind of go through a few different sort of genres of the shows that I've been involved in filming. The first one's kind of adventure shows. This is an example of one of these. Is Shark Wrecked. If any of you guys were tuned in yesterday with Paul de Gelder, he's the fellow down on the right-hand side. We had a webinar with him yesterday that I hosted. Fascinating gentleman who's actually a double amputee who lost his arm and his leg to a bull shark in Sydney Harbour. And now he's a shark advocate and a TV host, does a lot of adventure shows and stuff like that. And also James Glancy, who's on the left. He's a British adventurist. He's also been in the Royal Marines. And we pretty much took these two guys out to Cat Island. Now, Cat Island is an area where the oceanic whitetips breed off way, way, way out in the Bahamas. And we had these beautiful animals, these pelagic predators that you can see in the video playing. They're incredibly curious. And the whole premise behind this TV show was what would happen if people were stuck in the water for nearly 2 days in the open ocean. So in order to create a story around this, we had to blow up a boat. Yeah, I know. Seems a little dodgy, but no. We basically, alongside the help of Discovery and Shark, we purchased an old boat that was stuck in somebody's yard, and then we simulated the fact that if these guys were out fishing, and if they were fishing, what would happen if they had to jump off the boat? And well, the only way would be, in theory, to blow it up and sink it. So the boat was fully cleaned up to make sure there was no environmental waste associated with it, and then it was stuffed with explosives. And after the guys jumped off and swam for speed in the ocean, we blew it up. Now, moral of the story is, don't ever trust anybody who's in the explosives profession. Because if you can see that picture down there, you're going to see a video on the next slide. We asked the guy, oh, so how big's the explosion going to be? He was like, well, it's probably going to go up maybe 60 feet in the air. The mushroom cloud's going to go 60 feet in the air. So one of my colleagues, he was the drone operator, and he was flying the drone. He was putting two up in the, he was multitasking, putting two up in the air, and he had one that he had directly above the explosion, and the other one panning over the shot in the reverse. So the one above the top of the explosion, he was like, well, if they're saying the explosion can be 60 feet, let's put the drone up 120 feet. That's doubling it. It should be safe. No, not at all. The explosion went off. You saw this thing went up past 60 feet, past 120 feet, and kept going. Completely took the other drone out in the operation, and you can actually see it if you look closely on the footage. If you watch the episode on Shark Week, there's a little bird that drops out the sky, and it's not a bird, it's the other drone. All right, so you can see some of these clips here from the experience that we had with Paul and James. Now, as you can see, the explosion was pretty big, pretty decent size. Now, the interesting thing is you see a lot of interactions with these gentlemen and the sharks in the water. These sharks are coming up, they're nudging the camera, they're coming up, they're investigating Paul, especially his robotic limbs as well, because they're giving off kind of a bit of a metallic electrical signal. But at any time, the sharks weren't really coming in, and they weren't like, they weren't jaws bared, their eyes weren't rolled back, they weren't coming in for the attack. They were just incredibly curious of these guys in the water. Oceanic whitetips travel thousands of miles around the ocean looking for food, and any object that's floating around in the ocean in the deep blue out there could possibly be food. So these sharks were coming up and testing them, seeing what they were, just making sure they weren't prey, which they weren't. All in all, if you chat with James and Paul, they'll tell you that the actual interaction with the sharks was probably one of the more pleasurable parts of the trip. The hardest part for them was the survival, actually being in the ocean, having their bodies exposed to this constant cold, the wet, the sleep. The only time that it did get a bit dodgy was when the light got low, getting close to nightfall. The sharks' behavior changed, and I think that was basically because we couldn't see at night. We actually had to put the guys in a floating cage just for safety, just so we knew what was going on. But yeah, very, very cool experience, and pretty cool to be involved with. A way that created around the sharks to kind of tell you a bit more about them, give you a bit more of a story. All right, so the next sort of shows that we create are these blue chip natural history sequences. This is some footage similar to a show that I did for the BBC, which I'll show you a small clip of at the end of this, where we were actually filming lemon sharks giving birth. But here you can see these baby lemon sharks like to live up in the mangroves. They find these tiny little estuaries where the mother will actually come in on these big high tides and drop off their pups. And they'll basically give birth to these tiny little lemon sharks, who are perfect little lemon sharks as they pop out. And they come up into these little mangrove channels to refuge, as well as hang around with their buddies. A couple of scientists in the Bimini Biological Field Station, even one of the old PhD students, Tristan Guttridge, did his PhD on the social interaction between these sharks and how they have best buddies and friends, which is pretty cool. You see these guys swimming around. There we go. Cool. All right. So right here, this is a quick clip from actually filming a lemon shark giving birth. Now, it was probably one of the stickiest and gooeyest things I've ever experienced, and also one of the most amazing things that I've been able to film in the past. After seeing this big female roll up into the side of the mangroves, she's very labored breathing. She pretty much beaches herself. The water's so shallow that she's pretty much laying on the bottom when this all starts. And the babies start to corkscrew out from the tail, like tail first out, and they roll around. And you can see in this clip, you'll see, yeah, there's the female just slowly cruising up to the mangrove edge, and you'll see her popping in right here. And then the last moment, pop, here it comes. Big old gooey, slimy little baby shark. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, let's forget I even mentioned that song. Anyway, so you can see little baby shark wrestling itself away from that umbilical cord, and then as soon as it snaps that umbilical cord, it's a shark. You know, there's no maternal care given. Mom doesn't hang around and look after her babies. In fact, it's thought that there's a hormone that's secreted that she basically restricts her appetite, that stops her from turning around and munching the babies as she gives birth. But lemon sharks are carnivorous. They will actually eat other sharks, and there's no reason that if she comes back, she might not eat her young when she comes back in the future, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, hard to be a shark. But after the sequence was done, I got out, and all that shark afterbirth was floating around in the water. So as soon as I got out of the water, it was all clung to my wetsuit, and it just made me incredibly sticky and slimy. And yeah, it probably took 3 or 4 swims in the open ocean in that wetsuit to get the kind of sticky and the stank off, which was pretty gross. Yeah. Alrighty, so let me see. All right, the next sort of shows that we produce around sharks are based around science-based tests, which is pretty cool. We're kind of showing a little bit of science, a little kind of like that Mythbuster idea. This was a show that we did with a Belgian TV crew that we were looking at, are sharks attracted by human blood? Now, some people would think yes, some people might think no. And like I'd ask you, like, what would you think? Have a think about it. So if we look on the top slide here, all the film crew, we actually all went to the clinic and we all gave blood. So we all slapped up, gave a little bit of blood, and so we had all these blood bags, and we took them to this site known as Triangle Rocks, where we have reef sharks around, resident reef sharks. So we knew the sharks was already there, and then we had this device there, and we filled it with all that human blood. So it's pretty much a PVC box which has like a pressure release. So once it's down there, it'll stay sealed, and then once the release is opened, the human blood will be there, and then it strings that blood and will form a big cloud of human blood in the water column. Now, we already knew the sharks were there. They were conditioned to hearing boats come up to that site. So the sharks were around, swimming around, saying, oh, is this going to be a shark feed? Are we going to get some food? So it was good because we knew there was a good chance they were going to smell this blood. Now you can see the two brothers were the TV hosts. They were holding the device there, and there we go. Isn't that gross? It's pretty gross. Look at all that human blood billowing out of the device. Now we can see the sharks are there. They're swimming around. They're pretty chilled out. But just look at the behavior of the sharks. Look at the body posture. The fins on the whole are pretty much trimmed out. They're chilled out. They're kind of like looking like a plane flying around. What you want to look at is when sharks start to arch their backs, when their fins come really hard down over and sort of posture a little bit, that's when you have to be concerned. But you might have noticed that shark swam right through the blood, didn't really come back in. It's swimming very chilled out. There's no sort of erratic behaviors, no quick movements, no jawing, no real big posturing, and no quick turns going right back to the device. So you can see the brothers. And these guys weren't terribly comfortable in the water with sharks, but they weren't too concerned about what was going on. All right, so we then repeated, let me see, sorry, that's not queued up there. We repeated the trial with, sorry, something just went on there. We repeated, sorry, technological issues. We repeated the trial with fish blood. Here we go. Let me get that going. All right. So now the first thing you'll see is in there's a tiny, tiny little bit of fish blood because it was so hard to get a lot of fish blood. Like you think of all the blood that comes out of a human being, we got all these barracudas and we tried to bleed them and we got the tiniest, tiniest little bit of fish blood. But as soon as we opened up the device and a little bit of that scent got into the water column, the sharks went crazy. You can see they started swimming around pretty fast, started bumping into the device, see them start hitting the device. Even the fish, you see all the fish were feeding off it. Even the fish knew that it was something right to eat. So they were all flaking around. See the sharks bashing into the device. Eventually, one of the sharks bit the safety rope on the end of the device that was pulling the scent out. And at that point, the two brothers got pretty concerned. They weren't very comfortable in the water, so they decided that it was time to go. Oh, and then after they'd left, the sharks decided to pick up the object, drag it around the ocean for a bit, and yeah, have a cheeky wee bit of fun with it. Yeah, we found it about 250 yards away from where we originally did that test. So as you can see, pretty interesting. We can definitely sort of infer that sharks don't really like the smell of human blood. Now, for anybody out there who's kind of thinking like how to compare this in their heads, if you think I walked into your room right now with a hot steaming plate of chocolate chip cookies and that smell and that aroma was filling the room, would that make you feel hungry? Probably would. You'd probably want to have a bite of those cookies. But inversely, if I turned up with a big old rotten steaming bucket of dead fish that had been out in the sun, flies all on it, kind of rotting a little bit, that probably wouldn't make you feel hungry. And that's probably a little bit like how sharks feel about human blood. It's not really, it's something they could possibly taste and eat if they had to, but it's something that they're not sort of excited by, especially not species like Caribbean reef sharks that are not used to the smell of mammal blood. All right, so we're going to go a little bit on how evolving tech has helped us film sharks. So obviously you've seen a couple of times and maybe a couple of pictures. I think maybe if I right there, I don't know if you can see that in the little slide. There's me with a big tiger shark and I have a big camera housing. There's another big camera right up here. And oh, there we go. Then with a, oh, my fingers disappearing. That's pretty fun. Ooh, it's ghosty. But you can see there's a shot here of my big camera housing with a hammerhead shark. Now, technology has been evolving a lot over time. Now, if I pull out right now and see, we can see this amazing little piece of kit. Let's see if we can get it to open. This is like one of the first sort of cameras. It's a very, very, very old camera. You can see that we'd have to use this. We'd have to use a light meter as well, which was pretty amazing to actually capture images above water. And that's before even imagining to take this stuff underwater. You can see this is probably one of the most basic underwater cameras that I have ever used to start with. This was for taking some photographs, which they weren't very good when I first tried doing that to start with. But then if you compare to, I'm going to pull this big boy out now. This guy here, I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty much, this was one of my first underwater camera housings, little big blue. The reason I still have it is because it went so obsolete so quickly that I couldn't sell it. So it's probably going to make a nice desk ornament and lighting object. But this was one of my first underwater camera housings. You can see it's pretty basic. It's pretty much a big aluminum tube that has some buttons attached to it. And it's a little bit sad when you compare in this day and age, you can do the same thing with this right here. This is actually better quality than that. No, not the sock. Sorry. One sec. It's a very fancy GoPro holder, you see. Yeah, so you can do the same thing with this. This is actually much better quality than that big old rig that we were holding there, that I was holding there. So just think, if you have a passion for getting into this, I started with these big objects because that was the only object. You guys have the option for for working with these amazing tools like this to get into this industry, which is cool. However, we are using cameras because they've evolved and they've got smaller and the technology's got better. We're able to use them to learn about sharks, which is pretty cool. Now, the first thing I'm going to tell you guys about, this was a project that was being done by the Bimini Biological Field Station with laser telemetry. This is sharks with laser beams, but not actual laser beams on their heads. This was laser beams on the camera. Now, if you watch the diver, he has a camera that he's holding, and it has two little laser beams on both sides of that camera. There we go. He's kind of doing his pose, Magnum, blue steel. And those lasers zap the sharks. No, they don't zap the sharks. They don't harm the sharks at all. They basically are transmitted onto the shark, and the images and video are captured on the camera as the shark swims by. By taking those points between those two laser dots that are on the side of the shark, they can extrapolate the number of pixels between those laser points and figure out how long that shark is, which is pretty cool. Now, some sharks, like you see that nurse shark, are incredibly resilient. You can, scientists, you can bring them alongside the boat and they do really well. Whereas some sharks, like this big gold great hammerhead, they need to continually swim and have water pump over their gills to survive. So it's very tricky to catch and work them up without hurting the shark or stressing them out. So by using these laser telemetry systems, we can measure the sharks and figure out how long they are without actually stressing these animals out. So one way cameras are helping us learn about sharks. Pretty cool. The next way is, whoops, sorry, I'm skipping back and forth a touch. And the next way we're learning about sharkies, as well as a lot of other marine critters, are bruvs. Now, if anybody's a marine biologist or in the ocean sciences field, they're probably quite familiar with these items. Bruvs stand for baited underwater video systems. You can see the scientist Mark Bond on the photo with a very basic bruv setup. They can be as basic as this, which is basically that looks like a metal frame with an underwater camera in a housing that faces a bait cage. Now, the bait cage will have a specified and standardized amount of bait that will chum the area for a certain amount of time. And usually that'll be dictated on how long the camera batteries last. A lot of times this will just be set for like an hour. And you can also have cameras where you'll have bruvs where you'll have two cameras set up on them so you can get a stereoscopic view of what's going on. Now, the great thing about bruvs is they're fairly easy to construct, but they give us baseline data of what animals are down there on the reefs. And that also is allowing us to not be there and impact the animals by our presence, because you've got to think, if we're swimming around with a camera filming, oh, there's a fish, they're going to be stressed out because we're a big object, we're a possible big predator in the water, and we also, if we're on scuba, we're blowing bubbles, which sometimes they don't like. So it's a great way of us looking and getting a baseline data of what is around, looking at what is there. But they're also able to go to places that us as human beings have trouble getting to, like the depths of the ocean. Now, this is a good friend of ours, Andy Murch, who actually put kind of a small sort of bruv system down to 800 feet off the coast in the Bahamas. Now, you can see this fish comes in. This is all within a few minutes. All within a few minutes this happens. This fish kind of comes in. Maybe it's not as bright flavor. Can't really figure it out. Not really adulting very well. And then we get another big old predator. Now, I'm sure you guys might be able to guess what this cheeky predator is. See him coming up in a minute. Yeah, see the stripes? Now, what's really cool is when you see the shark turn, look at its rotating membrane. Look at that. Protecting the eye. This little eyelid going clack, 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 protecting. As you can see, this big, beautiful tiger shark kind of definitely won against the bruv, and comes back for another snack. And here we go. Oh, no, nearly. And again. Oh, there we go. And taking my ball and I'm going home. Yeah, yeah, the tiger shark definitely won that battle. All right, so very, very cool piece of kit. Another way that we're using technology to learn about sharks is like this really cool piece of kit called the Aris camera. Now the Aris camera actually is a little bit like Daredevil, a superhero who uses sound waves to see. It uses sound waves to see. It's like sonar, like a dolphin, sends out pings, and it means that in very bad visibility situations or in low light situations, you can see what's going on. So you can see in the dark. So you can see animals in really murky water, like somewhere like the Shark River down in the Everglades where it's like chocolate milk. You'd be able to see those cool little sharkies zipping around. So yeah, another very cool piece of kit. And then one of my favorites, which are fin cameras. Fin cameras are amazing bits of technology, which, as you can see, can be put on other animals too. You've got penguins, turtles, a little leopard seal on the right, or like cheeky little nar on the left. But technology has been advancing over time. So you can see in 1987, these things were giant. And now they're nearly as big as these GoPros. In fact, we have used GoPros on the backs of sharks for science as well as Shark Week and other networks. So we can see as technology has advanced over time, these things have got to work is you can deploy them on a shark you can deploy them on the shark if the shark's been caught for science, if it's being worked up, or you can clamp it on as the shark swims past underwater, which is kind of fun. I've done that a couple of times on hammerheads and even on tiger sharks. So it's you have to time it right and get the angle right, but it's a little tricky. Now the way it works is these clamps go onto the fin, and then they have these little bits of metal which have kind of a magnesium base of them. We call them galvanic strips. So the magnesium reacts with that salt water, and the magnesium and the salt basically cause, over a certain amount of time, we might put it on, hope for it to be 4 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. It's never exactly like accurate at all, but it comes off within an hour usually each way. And after that amount of time, it dissolves and pops, and that whole clamp opens up, and then you can see that bright orange bit on the back of that tiger shark there. That's usually syntactic foam. Now that's a special type of foam that they use in submarines, etc., and other deep water vehicles like ROVs. Now that submarine is made up of micro bubbles, just tiny, tiny little glass bubbles all fused together, which don't compress under depth. So once it pops open, it'll pop and float back to the surface. And when it hits the surface, it'll have a satellite signal that it pings off to the satellite, and we'll get a message either to our computer or our mobile phone. This is the GPS coordinate that the tag is in. Then we go out on a boat and search for the tag. Now, the tag will usually also have a VHF Yagi, which is like an acoustic transmitter, which we can put headphones on and hold what looks like a big old TV aerial, and it looks really cool. Yeah, really, really cool. And we spin that around until we find the tag. And once we get that tag back, we can get the cool video footage. But a lot of these fin cameras also have accelerometers in them and other cool bits of tech, like that swimming, what angle it's swimming at. The gyros show us going up and down, so we can see it and also get the data as well as the depth and the salinity of what these sharks have been doing and where they've been at. Now the great thing about these is that we see sharks, we film sharks when we're with them, but we don't know what they do at the depths and when we're not influencing them as human beings. So we're able to see what they're up to. And right here you can see a great hammerhead with one arm. And right here you can see a fin camera that I put on in Bimini on the back of a great hammerhead shark. You can see it swimming around the bottom. It's kind of its head zipping from side to side, kind of like a metal detector, trying to figure out where the food is. A couple of social interactions with other animals. It's almost like you're in a video game and you are the hammerhead. All right. Cool. Another very cool piece of kit, very expensive piece of kit, is the Shark Cam. This was developed by Woods Hole. This is Remus is its name. If you look at it, it's a picture of it right there. It looks like a big submarine, and that's basically what it is. It's a submarine stuffed with bunches of cameras. Now, this was a show that we worked on for Shark Week called Shark Cam Stakeout. Now, they've done this with great whites, which I think you'll see a shot of down in the bottom right in a minute. But the idea behind it is that you capture the shark, or you find a shark and you put a tag on its back, which is a small sort of transponder that sends messages to this big submarine camera, Remus, and then the mothership releases the submarine cam, Remus, and it follows the shark at distance. So the scientists can choose where it, well, you can see down on the bottom right that great white didn't like being followed by the shark, yeah, so it follows it at distance. You can basically see what the shark is up to at depth. Now, Greg Scommel came to Bimini and worked with the Sharklab team, and we did this for Shark Week's 30th anniversary, where we had this amazing bit of kit in the water. You can see the tag on the back of the shark there, swimming around. You can see it's all swimming there. We can see the bull shark bumping it a little bit. Now, the great thing about this research was, up till we did this, we pretty much thought the bull sharks, we knew they migrated over deep water and then they came into the docks and the shallow waters around the Bahamas to feed from the fish traps, as well as maybe go along the edge a little bit. But all the time we'd seen bull sharks was in the shallows. We hadn't really seen them in the depths. And this revealed the shark was tagged in the shallows right up in the marina, in the docks. It went out at night and out into incredible depths and did some crazy diving up and down in these depths, searching for food right off the edge of the Gulf Stream. So pretty amazing piece of kit, showing us some pretty amazing behavior of these animals. All right, now, as you can see, drones now are being used for us to learn a lot about these amazing critters. Now, a lot of animals can be affected by drones, whereas sharks, they don't care. They're not really worried about them at all. You can see, yep, he doesn't like them. Oh, yep, and it's gone. Yeah, maybe if you're a primate, you don't like drones, but sharks definitely aren't getting influenced by them. You can see this great hammerhead cruising along the shoreline. Not a care in the world that it's there. And the great thing is that we can actually secretly observe them like a bird above, of their behaviors and see what they're doing. We can also use it as a looking at population studies, looking at doing surveys to find out how many animals are frequenting areas at different times of the year. The great thing with drones too is you can set them so they fly at the same height and do these standardized sort of surveys and transects back and forth, where they'll fly over, and then afterwards you can look at the footage and count the animals in the area. You can even figure out how big the animals are in the area by putting some fake sharks. If you look at the picture on the left, these are some shark decoys. They basically are, you cut out a shape of a shark and you put them in areas of your transect or your drone flight. So afterwards, if you compare it to flights you've done where you know the sharks have been around, you can look at how big those sharks are in comparison to your decoys, rough idea of how long the sharks are you're seeing. So pretty cool piece of kit. Another really cool piece of kit, as well as getting some sneaky natural behaviors of these animals, is drones are actually being used to save humans and sharks. Now you look at this little ripper, which is being developed over in Australia. It's a drone that has an algorithm that can actually detect the difference between the silhouette and the shape of whales, sharks, people, like some guy on a surfboard. So the idea is they'll have these out so that lifeguards can deploy these drones over swimming beaches, and they'll be able to tell the shark and hopefully even see what species of shark it is and figure out whether they need to pull people out of the water. The great thing about that is that if these can be utilized effectively, then we don't have to start putting drum lines out to kill sharks. We don't have to put nets out to kill sharks on populated beaches. if we have this great early warning system incorporated. Yeah, beautiful big bull shark cruising along the shoreline, looking for prey to push it up against the break. All right, and then virtual reality. Virtual reality is one of the other ways that we are learning about these amazing, amazing animals, but it's also how we're sharing them. Not everybody wants to jump into the ocean straight away, especially with a shark. So if we can give them a little taste, just a tiny little taste, it's like to be down there in the open ocean, sometimes it's enough to inspire them to jump in themselves. You can see this video gives what we call a tiny planet render of a virtual reality scenario. You can see some great hammerheads in Bimini there. And this is one of the things for Sharks for Kids we take into the classrooms with a lot of the children. We do it at events as well. So we allow kids that may not be able to jump in the ocean or haven't had the opportunity to get to the ocean to see what it's like being in the water with these amazing animals. Now you'll see on this next slide some kids that we put the device on in Turks and Caicos when we were there for one of the film festivals. And their reaction. It's a great reaction. I've seen similar reactions from adults too. Okay, so the last way in which we are using cameras to help and learn about sharks is we're using it for Sharks for Kids. As Ron mentioned, as well as what I do filming for production and TV companies, a lot of the time we use our media assets that we collect to produce videos, footage, and little stories and materials and educational resources that can be used for Sharks for Kids. So if you guys are interested and need to have a look a little bit more or want to learn a little bit more about these amazing creatures, make sure you go to the website, which you guys probably have found already if you're on the webinar, but if not, www.sharksforkids.com. Make sure you check out some of the teaching packets, the resources that are in there. There's loads of bits and pieces to learn about these amazing critters on there. So yeah, that pretty much concludes the talk. And yeah, any questions, I guess?
Great presentation. I actually missed the first one, so I'm glad that I was here to see this one. Some amazing footage you have. So yes, we did get a lot of questions coming in. Lots of people saying hi as well to both you and Jillian. Hoping everything's going good. So yeah, I'll start fielding some of the questions. One of them deals with, on Shark Week, it seems like you guys always have the sharks where they want to be. Like, do you just jump in the water and sharks are there, or do you know, how hard is it to find the sharks, I guess?
There's certain areas where you can just jump in the water and the sharks are there. But unfortunately in this day and age, they're growing few and far between, especially because a lot of places globally, shark populations are threatened. Anything to do with overfishing, right through to habitat devastation. So it really depends where you jump in the world. And also some places like Cat Island, where we had those beautiful big oceanic whitetips, the sharks are conditioned that if they hear a boat, it's like a dinner bell. So it might be food. So that show we did for Shark Week, we had 8 to 12 oceanic whitetips with us at any time for at least the first 24 hours before we put a single, like, I mean, not even a tiny chunk of bait in the water. We had 8 to 12 oceanic whitetips with us the whole time. So there are places like that. There's certain areas like in the mangroves that we know about where we know those lemon sharks are using spots to hide out. So we know they're going to be in there at certain tide phases. But generally on the whole, when filming sharks, the nice thing about them is that usually can park a boat up in an area where you know they're going to be, and you can put a little bit of bait in the water, a bit of chum in the water, and if the current's working for you, the sharks will come to you, which is quite nice. So they always compare it to like filming dolphins versus sharks. It's like sharks are there, you just pull the boat up and then the bait does the work, whereas dolphins, you sometimes have to you find them in 10 minutes, and sometimes I've spent the entire day, 8 hours, just driving around on the boat in the ocean, and you don't even see a single fin. So yeah, it's quite nice in that respect.
Yeah, that's the footage that they don't always show on Shark Week, but a lot goes in to capture those amazing videos that you do. And you were talking about the mangroves, and a lot of people were really interested in the lemon sharks, and particularly that birthing footage. That's just incredible. Someone wanted to know what type of predators might eat those baby sharks. Besides, you said the shark could come back and eat its own as well, but what other type of predators?
Well, for quite a few years, the Sharklab has been doing a study where they're trying to capture the baby sharks just after they've been born, and putting them in a mangrove location. So that the idea is that if they've been pit tagged, and they have these little tiny pit tags in them, which is like what your dog or your cat might have, if those sharks come back, like if it's a female and it comes back to give birth to its young, then you can show that local site fidelity, which basically means it's a little bit like a salmon going back to the same stream that it grew up in. It's lemon sharks will go back to the same mangrove, or a lot of lemon sharks will. Not every one, but the majority of them go back up to the same mangrove estuaries that they grew up in. Of course, they knew it was a good place where there's a lot of food. It was good, nice safe area and all the rest of it. So they just tagged one of these little critters, and they'd sent it on its way, and then just probably. They were listening to it acoustically, so trying to figure out where it was going, and then from the direction of where the acoustic was, there was just a big splash in the water, a little bit of blood, and that shark had been alive for less than a couple of hours, and a big old grumpy old mean barracuda had come and just sliced it clean in half. Pretty hard life to be a shark. Everybody thinks these predators have got it made, but until they get older, they're pretty vulnerable, really. They're pretty vulnerable. And even other sharks will eat them. And even maybe it's brother or sister if they're bigger. Maybe even the mother or the father if they see them, and it's an easy meal. Yeah, so tough life to be a shark.
Yes, it is. So I think a lot of the kids on today think you have the coolest job out there, and they're really wanting to know. We've got someone with kids age 13 and 14. They're wanting to know, hey, how do I get into doing sort of what Duncan and I think asking in general, Jillian, myself, everyone in this business. So maybe you could give them some advice.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things about sort of growing up in this day and age is that you have things like this. Well, you can't even see it. This is you have things like this, a phone which has a camera. It's got a camera in it. Like I didn't even have a mobile phone when I was a kid. And then you've got things like GoPros, tiny little cameras, which shoot amazing quality footage for what they are. So there's not really any sort of excuse for not sort of having access to cameras. You don't need to have the biggest, the best camera. In fact, some of the best photographers and videographers I've seen or have come up had incredibly basic kits to start with, because it's the best camera, like as people say, is the one that you have, right? And what like the one that you have to tell the story with. They are pretty cool bits of kit, but also learning about animals too. Like whether you want to go and shoot big cats in the Serengeti or you want to film tigers in the deep, learning about the animals, learning what their behaviors are, and getting experience being in the water around them. They will tell you how they're going to behave. Like, and it's crazy. I've got things like such as a giant tiger shark that you'd think would be bold and brash, but a lot of them are very held up on visual cues. So you can basically I've had times where I've been filming the tiger shark, but if I'm looking at it, it'll swim away. Whereas if I'm kind of pretending I'm not looking at the tiger shark whilst I'm pointing the camera at it, and then right at the last minute when it's right there, turning around and looking at it, that's when it'll turn. Sometimes they're pretty skittish and they're worried about it. So learn about I'd say use the cameras that you have in your hands. Make little videos, make little photo projects. Go out in the garden, take some photos of some critters. hone your craft. Go, like, put your stuff out on social media, and don't be afraid of being criticized. Like, criticism on images and stuff is very constructive because it helps you get better on it. And then I think too, as well, if you want to get underwater, is get underwater. Join one of the diving programs, and basically be comfortable underwater, especially if you want to do photo and video, because you can't just, like Ron can attest to the fact, you can't just jump in the water with a camera and learn to dive at the same time. You need to be comfortable first in both worlds before you combine them.
Yep, no, that's really good advice. And then as far as studies, marine biology, those
Yep.
sciences, M, who's 11, asked a couple times about Emma the shark, the big Emma the shark, and what's happened to her, and are there sharks bigger than Emma? So there's some curiosity about Emma, which is sort of in your backyard where you live.
Yeah, like there's Emma's pretty much she's a Facebook star. I think she's got more followers on Facebook than I have. She's got a massive social media following, and true right, she's a beautiful shark. And every time I filmed and worked at Tiger Beach, when you jump in there and you see her, it brings a big old smile to your face, because for the size of her, she is so charismatic. She's so soft. She is so gentle, and she is a big, beautiful shark. What's happened to her? She does keep occasionally peeking in. She obviously moves in and out of the area. Obviously, she's got things like to do, like make some more sharky babies and have some little pups, and also tiger sharks are fairly nomadic. They may hang around in Tiger Beach quite a bit, but they also like to move huge distances, like thousands and thousands of miles. And you can ask any tiger shark scientist, what's their usual pattern? It's hard to know, because tiger sharks just seem to like to go everywhere a lot of the time. A lot of satellite tagged tiger sharks are, one will go left, the other one will go right, the other one will go up, and the other one will go down from the location. It's
Interesting.
It's pretty cool seeing some of those tagged roles on there. And yeah, there are definitely bigger tiger sharks than Emma. And I was, all I'm going to say is watch Shark Week this coming season, and yeah, I was lucky enough to see some much bigger tiger sharks than Emma on a recent shoot before everybody closed it down. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I can't wait to see that. And then Joseph, age 9, had some questions about the Bimini Sharklab. That's been a couple times. How long's it been there, and can you go visit it?
Oh, of course, yeah. Doc Gruber. Oh wow, how old is the place? I can't tell you how old it is, but it's probably one of the oldest, longest established marine out on field research sites, that has probably the longest field study of sharks, probably in the world globally. It's been going for years and years and years. It was founded by Dr. Samuel Gruber, who was a pioneering shark scientist, and bless his soul, he passed away last year. But he pretty much paved the way, along with a lot of other scientists at that time, to allow us to actually understand and appreciate these animals. He started the lab, which is pretty much was a glorified trailer held together by like zip ties and duct tape, maybe a bit of super glue here and there, and it's based in Bimini, Bahamas. Now, depending on your age, you can actually go, and if you want to get some sharky experience, at the minimum side of things is, if say you're taking a vacation in Bimini, you can call the lab and make sure that there's a tour open, and you can actually go down and visit the Shark Lab, give a little donation to them, and they'll give you a tour, take you out to the back pens. You get to see the little lemon sharks, and you can see some of the research that they've done. If you're a little bit older, or you don't have the time to dedicate for not spending a huge amount of time away, you can do what's known as a research experience, which is usually around a week, whereas you go with a small group of other people on a research experience, and you get a really cool experience zipping around doing all the sharky research. You get to see the hammerheads being tagged and ID'd at certain times of the year. You may get to go up into those little estuaries to see those baby lemon sharks. You may get to go on the Caribbean reef shark dive, some stingray tagging, seeing a shark being ultrasounded, seeing how they do all that side of work. And it's getting to see a lot of the cool stuff without the messy stuff. Because if you want to fully immerse yourself into getting experience, you can jump as a volunteer. Now, a volunteer means that you're there for at least a month. They prefer 2 to 3 months, and you're going to be doing everything. You get to do all that cool stuff, but you also get to clean. You get to prep the lines. You get to write all the data down. You get to, work in the lab. You get to do all sides of it, but you also get given more responsibility. That means that you're more hands-on by the end of it, which means that if you go, whereas you'd be just observing sharks being tagged, you'll be the person tagging the sharks by the end of it, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow. That is pretty cool. I'd love to come down there and do that for a month. I don't mind cleaning, pitching in. That sounds like a great experience in a way for people to get some hands-on training right away.
Yeah, it's a very good way for especially university students, whether they're taking a gap year or they're finishing off. But the other thing too is you don't necessarily have to have a background in marine biology just a passion for sharks, but it's a good way to get that experience if you're having trouble finding places to get experience so that you get jobs, basically.
Yeah, and we are getting a lot of questions about, and this is great because this is what this is all about, trying to get people excited about sharks. So a lot of these kids want to know, about the schooling, how do they get into it? And so someone asked, and I know this is going to be a tough question, Violet, age 11, wants to know what's one of the best marine colleges out there.
Oh, dear.
Not in Scotland, obviously.
Yeah, it's tricky because I went through a marine biology program in Scotland, in Stirling in Scotland, which was a great program. I really enjoyed my lectures and the guys there. And the projects that I actually ended up for my dissertation projects, I studied octopus. Yeah, so very, very different than the fields I'm kind of working with now. But it's really hard to know which are the best programs. Like I know like NOVA, FIU, a lot of these places in the States close to the ocean all have amazing programs. Not having grown up in the States and actually been hunting to go to universities in the States, it's hard for me to actually be able to pinpoint which ones would be the best.
Yeah,
but I would definitely say just kind of have a look at what the programs are. It's tricky to know that for me. Sorry.
No, there's a lot of good ones out there, and there's new ones. We had Dr. Silowski on
sure, yeah.
weeks ago, and now there's a shark lab out in the middle of the desert in Arizona.
Well, that's the thing I would say as well. Instead of kind of looking at getting overwhelmed with the number of places that you want to figure out where you want to study, maybe figure out who you want to work with, whose research inspires you, because most of these scientists and researchers, like you look at Dr. Chris Lowe, who's affiliated with University, Mike Hatehouse is affiliated with another university, all these different researchers, Derek Burkholder affiliated with another university, all different sort of veins, but they're all affiliated with different universities. So if they inspire your research or you like the work they do, especially with whatever critter they're working with, I'd say figure out the scientist and then follow the train to figure out which university they're working with.
No, that's a good idea. Definitely go after your interest in people. So, hey, we're coming up on top of the hour, Duncan. Really wanted to thank you for doing this again, and we recorded this time, so it's going to go up there, and people can check this out later, and you can share it from your website. And thanks a lot, and we'll probably see you and Jillian on hosting different ones later today or this week. So thanks again. We really appreciate it, judging from the participants and questions.
Thank you very much, Ron. Much appreciated. And everybody out there, thank you for your time. Really appreciate you guys zooming in and watching. Stay safe out there, and hopefully see you all out there with some sharks in the water sooner than later.
Yes, exactly. Cool. Well, hey, I did promise that we have some certificates available for people that are interested, and then also wanted to show you our website that we have. So sharksforkids.com, and when you go there, you land here on the home page and can find out some really cool information, see the number of students we've reached, over 128,000 now, in 15 countries in person and 56 countries over the web. So we do a lot of outreach. But if you want to look for the certificates, the webinars page will tell you about all the upcoming webinars, and then webinar certificates. And you can go up here and print out these certificates. Here's the one. If this is the first one you've seen, print this one out. You can color it if you want. You get a participation certificate for one webinar. There's one for 5, and then for you pros out there, there's one for 10 or more webinars. So that's a pretty significant number of webinars. So definitely get some credit for these. And also, while you're on the website, lots and lots of activities. We've got questions today about how do I learn more about sharks and get ready for school. Curriculum has a lot of activities on there for your parents and teachers to use and actually teach you classes on different sharks. Crafts, and then for the students, you can go out and look at some fact sheets and find out what your favorite shark may be. And I'll just show you some craft sheets here. You can do Tilly the tiger shark. You've got coloring. You've also got how to draw a shark, which we've had a couple of sessions on how to draw a shark with Julius over the last couple of weeks, but it's a lot of fun. And you can even make a model of a shark. So just lots of cool stuff. So please check us out online. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close today's session. But thanks, everyone. There is a session later on at 7 p.m. tonight on salmon sharks, which I'm going to be tuning in for sure. That's 7 p.m. Eastern. But check on the website or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and definitely look forward to having you all on another show. So thank you and have a good day, and everyone be safe.